everybody, to a special edition of Pod Strickland. I am your host. I am Shwinnypooh, and I am here with a very special co-host today, Alex Wolfe. Alex, how are you?
I'm good. Good. What's up? Thanks for listing all my credentials. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
you're just Alex Wolfe.
I'm
That's all
just
you are
Alex
to me.
today. It's fine.
the host, the co-host of Locked On Knicks, editor in chief of the Strickland,
Yeah.
just all around super Knicks fan, Alex Wolfe.
There we go.
But we do have a special guest with us today. We have Yaron Weitzman. Yaron, how are you doing?
I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Oh yeah, anytime, and much appreciated making time for us.
Of course.
And we were talking to Yaron before we got on the show, but he's Knicks royalty this week. He's making all the pit stops. He's helping everybody out.
I'm always Knicks royalty.
There you go. That's the spirit. So how are you doing today?
I'm, good. A little tired, a little overwhelmed, but so it goes. So goes life these days, right? So
It's dealing with Knicks fans all week. I can only imagine.
that I've been enjoying reading I've been enjoying that one. Reading
the faithful online.
Everyone guessing. Everyone knows who I talk to for a story. That's always fun. That good stuff.
And
it's
people
funny.
Get really mad at you. Perry's your source. Tell us right now.
There was one that because I wrote, here it's right next to me. I wrote a book on Sixers in the process. So clearly, because I like Sam Hinkie's thinking, which if you read the book, you might disagree. Clearly, then Brock Aller is my source / the guy I'm puffing. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, Brock Aller is your god. We got it. We're of course, for anybody that's unfamiliar somehow, the biggest story this week that's come out about the Knicks. By Yaron on the New York Post, inside look at how Leon Rose rebuilt the Knicks. Quote, "We need Quickley," which is, of course, one of the lead quotes by William Wide Wes Wesley that sort of sets the tone for the whole story about sort of this power dynamic within the Knicks and all that stuff. Yaron, I guess we'll start off. I found this kind of interesting when you did the Knicks Film School pod the other day. You mentioned.
Are you allowed to mention other podcasts here?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're friendly with Macri to some degree.
We're frenemies with Macri.
Yeah. We pretend to hate him, but really love him. But yeah, we noticed on your appearance there the other day, you mentioned like this story sort of is whatever the fan reading it wants it to be. Yeah. How has that played into like how it's been received this week of the sort of responses you're getting? Because some people I know read it and said there's tension in the Knicks front office. The sky is falling. This whole thing is going to crumble already. And then other people are like, it's good to have a workplace where people disagree with each other and where you ultimately have someone who can make the right choice. So,
that's the whole thing. Yeah, the whole thing. I mean, it's too early to tell on any of this, right? We're not even a year in. It's too early to tell. So you can, I cheated in the story a little bit. I leaned on Quickley. I could also talk about Obi Toppin, who they really wanted, and that hasn't worked out so well, right? The narrative part there wasn't as fun as the Quickley part. But yeah, it's if you're like the person who sees sky is falling, which I assume, I don't understand how Knicks fans don't feel that way, but so it goes, to each their own. If you're the person who sees that all the time, then you'll see issues here. If you're the person who, I know plenty of these Knicks fans, and I never understood them. If you're the person who thinks that every player is the second coming and everything's great and everything's going to be working out, you can say, hey, this is great. Yeah, and the answer is like, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, right? I don't know if this is good or not, if these processes are right, if this is sustainable or not. I just find it interesting that this is what it looks like right now, or this is what it has looked like.
It's really tough that you just called me out to my face there.
Which one were you?
I'm definitely everybody's the second coming fan.
Okay.
If I was leaning towards one. No, I actually thought what was more interesting to me, at least, in the story was, there was obviously this interesting dynamic you touched on with, I mean, it was hilarious to me reading it where like you got Tibbs calling Brock Aller Hinkie, which, that being an insult is its own like hilarious thing in terms of like how you view team building.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I thought was interesting was how you touched on, like, so much of what you touched on in the article about this is what Brock Aller wanted to do. Like, he preferred to do these things. And then if you look at like the actual decisions that they made,
yes.
A lot of them tend to be like what Brock Aller was suggesting. And so, at the very least, that doesn't mean he has like ultimate authority or anything like that, or he has Leon's ear more than anybody. But I think like if there was concerns about will Leon be willing to like listen to a kind of a more nerdy approach to team building, like I would say the evidence is he's at least open to it.
Yeah, it's hard to I know I agree. The results were that the part that's hard to nail down, and I wish I had answers on this. Like, did they actually offer Gordon Hayward a contract? Like, or is it just discussions? Like, that's an interesting one. It's hard to tell. I'm not convinced there was a full plan here always that they stuck to, as opposed to what the
Mm-hmm.
final results were. I might be wrong. So like the Hayward thing is a good example, right? It's hard to tell. Did they offer him a little bit, and they tried to get him on a steal, and then they figured, okay, if he comes, then we'll just veer a little this way. I don't know. Like it's hard to pinpoint that, but yeah, the results are certainly they went the I'll call it the Brock Aller route. I mean, I don't. That's maybe not giving him too much credit. That's maybe taking some of the voice or power away from Leon Rose. That's unfair, but just that style of thinking, like the more long term thinking. And by the way, I'm someone who thinks like I like to think of myself as a pretty intelligent basketball fan, understanding how these things work, and I think and I believe in that sort of stuff. And I was someone who thinks they should have signed Fred VanVleet, to a big contract and overpaid for him because I think there's value in that kind of stuff. So the stuff there's gray areas here, but no, in the end, it clearly, I mean, they clearly went that direction. The Alec Burke, Nerlens Noel.
Yeah. And I think, and it's like, like you said, I mean, I know Mark Stein has reported that they were in conversations with Hayward.
Correct,
it's not clear
right.
Again.
That for sure, right? But that's which
it's not clear.
I'm curious, like what was where was actually left, right? And Mark.
Yeah, like what was the breaking point? Like what is the point they reached? They were like, well, we can't do that. So
right,
yeah,
it'd be really interesting to know. Yeah, I'm not sure.
So one thing, now we're sort of diving into power structure and stuff like that. And I think that's mostly, I mean, at least for me, when I was reading the article, that was mostly what was interesting to me, was looking into, you can glean a lot from these like little, it was cool the way that you reported it, where it was just kind of like a lot of little stories that kind of just added together into one big narrative about like the early part of this season and the off season and stuff. And, from that, fans at least, can start gleaning sort of a power structure. And maybe you got some impression of this too as you were reporting it. But what's interesting, I noticed some people have asked you about Scott Perry already, which for whatever reason, that's the sticking point with a lot of people, is like, what's Scott Perry's role? Like, but I think most people that follow the team assumed that he was probably just there to sort of usher in the new regime and
I was surprised that so many people seem to be thrown off by it. To me, it's exactly his role is, I think, exactly what you guys, anyone who's semi-informed, not even even a fan, that's what a guest his role is. Like, I'm surprised that people seem to be confused by that.
Yeah, so I'm not too worried about that. I feel pretty confident that, he's even, you can read the tea leaves. There were some very favorable profiles that came out on him in the last couple weeks. You could assume that maybe someone within the Knicks said, hey, let's talk to some of these reporters, get some nice profiles out there for him, help him find his new job or whatever. I don't think Perry's long for the Knicks. The one thing that, though, people were control F-ing Scott Perry's name in your story. I control F'd Walt Perrin and Frank Zanin, because those were two guys that the Knicks hired that I think a lot of fans thought were going to have a big say in the front office, particularly because yours is very, draft focused. I thought that I would see Perrin's name come up more. So I'm actually curious, what's sort of your impression on his role within the team? And then I guess if you want to talk about Zanin as well, who's sort of their pro scout, but it seemed to a lot of people that he was going to be a sort of a leading voice in the draft process, because he's in some ways rightly or wrongly credited for, Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, all these various gems that the Jazz have come up with. Alec Burks. Yeah. What's sort of your take on him and his role within the org that you could just kind of glean from your reporting?
Sure. So a couple of things. One, just on a story like this, there's room constraints, right? So I could go 6,000 words and go deep dives on everyone. You just can't, and you have to narrow it down. So to me, it was just the key players are more.
You mean the Post wouldn't give you their whole back 8 pages? It wouldn't have
And by the way, even if they did, like, I don't think, you guys are interested in Walt Perrin, and I'm not making fun of you. I don't know if there's a major audience there for a deep dive into Walt Perrin's role within the Knicks front office. I'm not making fun of you guys, right? I'm saying like that's more of a niche.
I guess you haven't come across Walt Perrin Hive on Twitter.
That's true, right? So to get in the story. Like you gotta limit your characters, to use the writing word, right? That's one thing just to keep in mind, and that's why I was getting a kick out of when people are reading into so many things. It's like, again, I didn't write a book on the Knicks on Leon Rose's first 6 months in front office, right? I wrote a 2-page story. So Walt Parr and Frank Zanin are really respected. They're really liked. They have voices and all that. The draft, Walt Parr was there. Like, I think I had this in the scene where he's huddling with Leon Rose and Wes as they're discussing Quickley. They just went a different direction. That's common. That doesn't mean that Leon Rose doesn't listen to his scouts. That's common among front offices. Scouts put together a board, and everyone's got their individual opinions, and teams do pre-draft differently. But at the end, most teams, kind of the scouting department, puts together an official board, and that gets filtered out. It's kind of what you expect, right? They get filtered up, and Leon Rose looks at that, and everyone looks at that, and teams often go in different directions for whatever reasons. It doesn't mean they don't respect their voices or opinions of those people. So yeah, the answer is, I would say it's a boring answer. Like, Walt Perrin's role and Frank Zanin's role is exactly what you think it is, right? It's exactly what fans assume. I believe, I should say. I'm not in the room every day, but that's my understanding.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, for the nerds like me, thank you for informing that, just to ease my worries. You know what I mean? I guess that leads to, like, I think a lot of people too, and I mentioned this a minute ago. A lot of people that were reading the story, commenting about it on Twitter and stuff, were saying that things seem contentious. The Schwinn already noted the jabs from Tibbs to Aller, calling him Sam Hinkie, and Tibbs, like, getting on his knees and begging Leon Rose to trade for win now players. But like, you've reported on front offices. You wrote a book about the process Sixers, which is a really great book. What do you think that this is normal? Is this like teams have to have differences of opinion, right? Like, I'm not crazy. I would think that this is somewhat normal happening in a front office, right?
Yeah, no, right. How's that for a good answer? Yes and no. So here, the normal part is, teams often do have differing views, and you want that, right? So to go back to Sam Hinkie, I thought one of the mistakes he made was surrounding himself with only people who thought like him and came from the same perspective. So he's somebody you probably could have used an Elton Brand type as his general manager, and that could have made a big difference. So that part's good. The part that I'd say no, there are two things where I say no. One is to have, I think, these sort of philosophical. There's a difference between arguing about which player we want at 23. That's completely. I mean, that's the most subjective thing ever, right? The draft's such a crapshoot. Versus direction of the philosophical direction of the franchise. Where should we go? And it's strange for those arguments to be taking place, whatever, 6 months into a new regime and all these new hires who should have been brought in, I would think, under the same with the same understanding of what the goals were moving forward, at least for that offseason number one, right? So like the example I've been giving is like, Toronto Raptors, I'm sure, sitting around now, and they probably have all types of different views there. We should trade Lowry and reset. No, we should trade for somebody. We can catch these. No, we should just, tread water and deal. Like, that's normal. They're in that kind of situation. The Knicks were not in that situation. This was a new team president making new hires. It was strange to me and other people around the league, when I would bring this up and talk to them, that they would not all be on the same page. Part of that might be Thibodeau's personality, where he was on the same page and then comes in and just gets. I had a quote like this, of a friend of his saying he just gets all consumed with it and just changes. Can't control himself. So that's part. The other part that's unique is the World Wide Wes aspect, where there's literally no one else like him in the NBA, right, in a front office, and it just so the perspectives he's bringing, the views, the opinions, and also his connection to Leon Rose is unique. And I'm using those words specifically because, like, by literal definitions, right? It's just that is the part that's different and changes the dynamic a little bit and makes it more distinct than and differentiates it from other front offices. Doesn't mean it's bad; it could work, but just it's different.
Like, as far as the differences in the front office, just like philosophically, do you think that at all might be a reflection of the fact that Leon Rose has never done this before? Like, this is his first time within an executive role. So is there some element of that where, like, I mean, in the story itself, I think there's a quote from somebody where they say he's not communicative enough.
Yeah.
but like, I mean, is that something where maybe he's just like he's kind of willing to listen to everybody, but doesn't actually know yet himself, like which way are we gonna go, and then he kind of just plays it out. Like I thought, like it was kind of interesting the process they had where Wes is like flying off the handle because he wants Quickly at 23, and Brock Aller's like, well, we can move down to 25 and pick up an extra second, and like ultimately Leon does that, but then he ultimately also listens to Wes and picks Quickly at 25. So I just wonder if there's like kind of a balancing act there, maybe, or just what your thoughts on
I
that.
mean, yeah, that's the idealized version, like the Quickly. So that's why I found it interesting, right? The Quickly, the back and forth is the idealized version of this all working out well. And you're combining everyone's
Mm-hmm.
skill sets and filtering it all and stuff like that. So Leon, no, for sure, him being new to this, like I'm not convinced that he had even how he got the job, right? Like it wasn't Mike Vorkunov reported this. Leon Rose didn't spend years preparing to be a GM. It kind of like was more of approached by Dolan. It's not like he had some deck ready about like how my 5-step process to rebuilding an NBA team and the things I have. Right? It's funny, but like I compared to like Steve Kerr when he wanted to get back to coaching. He spent all his years broadcasting, writing, making a notebook, talking to
Yeah, he
people,
made
just
like a
collecting,
dossier.
yeah, about like what I want to do. Like that happens. Leon Rose, maybe I'm wrong. I don't think he had that, right? I think it was more he was approached and like, okay, cool, I'll do this. Um, so it's like you take that into consideration. And again, I'm not convinced. There's definitely, especially in the offseason, there were talking to people from other teams, they were a little confused or curious about which direction he was going to go. That maybe that was him playing his cards close. Maybe he was sending out mixed messages because they don't know, and they're talking to Gordon Hayward and they're talking about taking Ed Davis at the same time, right? And like, how does that work, right? Like, and taking on the second round pick. So I don't know. I am not convinced that there's some drawn out plan here, like super process like plan here. Um, Maybe I'm wrong. They might not even need it. Things keep going well. Like I've talked about other people, like the Randall thing changes a lot of the
Yeah.
conversation, and the cupboard might be a little more full than we expected when he came in, and that can make you can suddenly look smarter if the team if
Yeah.
things look better, you can look smart real fast, right? And maybe it had nothing to do with you, and you can just progress. And oh, hey, I know this guy. Let's get him. Boom, you're done. So yeah, I don't remember the original question, but yeah, I'm not. I guess the thing is, I think you're right. I don't know what the plan is. So I don't know if it's him flying by the seat of his pants or if he's actually like I don't know how the deliberations are
Yeah.
happening in each moment. Is my answer to
Yeah. And I think what makes it tricky too is like, you know, Hinkie had a background in various front offices, right? Like you kind of had an idea of, okay, he cares about, you know, the asset stuff, sure, but like on the court, he was always very clear, like play fast, shoot a lot of threes, spread the court, all that kind of stuff. Like he was pretty clear about that. Whereas with Leon, like we really don't know what his he might not even have a basketball philosophy for all we know.
that. Right.
So he's kind of like I mean, if you look at the coaches they even interviewed, and like sure, I think they always wanted Thibodeau. I think Tibbs
Yeah, it
was
was
always
going to be
very
Thibodeau the whole time, I
yeah,
think.
it was going to
But
be
yeah.
Thibodeau the whole time. But like even if you just look at the coaches they interviewed, and then even the guys that they kind of added to the staff around Tibbs, there's not like some unifying
Well,
thread
what I would
with
say, no,
them.
the unifying thread, it's not philosophical, it's
Right.
relationships, right? And
Yeah.
that, I think, so that's the philosophy, which is not really a philosophy, but that I believe is the philosophy, right? It's like relationships, who we know, stuff like that. And again, it could work. Maybe it gives you so much more information that other people don't. And you create this,
Yeah.
family that can be honest, brutal, and honest with each other, and it works. Again, I'm a little cynical, but I could be very wrong.
I can't believe you'd be cynical about the Knicks.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
From the self-proclaimed, everybody is the Messiah fan over there.
Hey man, quickly was
The
3 for 8
example I
from
always
3 last
give is
night.
that Frank Williams was viewed as like the second coming, like he was going to be a starting point guard, and like for 6 months, that guy was just like you wouldn't trade him for I don't even remember who would be the guy. And
He hit a
that's the one
couple
I
of
always think about.
shots.
Yeah,
He hit a couple of
he
shots
hit
in
a
the
couple of shots.
playoffs.
He hit
Oh
a
man.
couple of shots. That's a great one.
It's interesting you're saying about the relationships and stuff, and you sort of alluded to a minute ago that you wrote the story about Quickley because it made for better visibility. I guess it was a better story, but it sounded like you also heard some stuff about the Toppin decision, and I think that's one that
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just say I think that's one that piqued Knicks fans' interest because of the CAA connection, obviously, and a lot has been made of, oh, if you're with CAA or you're from Kentucky, you're you know
Yeah.
infinitely more likely to become a Knick, I guess. So what's sort of your takeaway on that? As far as you're talking about relationships, that Leon is a relationships guy. This seems like a relationships front office. Like, do you think that sort of led to the Obi pick? And is that sort of like the cautionary tale here so far of how relationships can affect this? Because Obi has been, I guess, better in some ways than we thought he might be at the NBA level, but a lot of the things that stood out
Has
to
he?
scouts as being bad. Well, on defense, I think a lot
Okay.
of us are
Okay.
surprised with him. But on offense, he's, all the worst things that a lot of scouts said have been coming true. And, we go, oh, well, you could have taken Devin Vassell, who seems like he probably would have been a better fit for this team now.
And with CAA.
Yeah, and a CAA, it's like there's this other guy sitting right there. But what's sort of your takeaway on that? Like how the relationship aspect affected the Obi pick, especially because I
So the
believe he's represented by Leon's son on top of everything else.
Yeah, so the Obi pick. Okay, so the first time I heard this, even like the first time I heard somebody from a different team say, "Oh, Obi's definitely going to the Knicks," was like, I don't know, May, whatever, right?
Mhm.
Because of World Wide Wes. And there's some connection there. And again, I don't fully know it. Yeah. That was made up when they said that. Like, this is like complete bullshit, banter with NBA sources, but just clearly like the thought was already there, right? I think that was even before the lottery. So yeah, I mean, I put most of what I know about the Obi back and forth in the story, like the fact that Leon was happy the Cavs, was visibly happy the Cavs passed on him at 5. That was one team that was rumored to be interested in him. That Wes liked him, that Leon liked him. Um, the way I phrase it is my read on it. Again, I don't know. I wish I could ask these people these questions. I don't think it's like they owe Obi Toppin a favor, right? I don't think that's what it is. I think it's I like him. I know him really well, and I like him, and I think he's really good. Like it kind of blind your relationship can blind you a little bit,
Mhm.
and you want him on your team. That would be more. So I don't know if that makes you feel better or worse, right? It's kind of like the comparison I give is if you played, I think about times I played like my brother and I played sports, and like I pick him on my team, even though he's not great. Someone else might be better, but there's something about it where I'm like, no, I want to play with him. I see it. He's actually better than you realize, and things like that. That would be more my read on it. But yeah, it is sort of the cautionary tale because again, process results. You do wonder what's leading to the results, right? Is the process I know him better and therefore I like him? Are you actually looking into the strengths and weaknesses? Are you doing the same sort of deep dives and all that stuff? It's going to be the to use a stupid phrase, but the $1 million question going forward with this
Mhm.
franchise, with this front office.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
possible maybe there's even some case of being like, well, I know his character, I know he's a hard worker, so even though he
For
has
sure.
these
Exactly.
deficiencies, I think, based off knowing his character, I think he could be a good fit, which is probably what led to the Obi pick, because he does, if nothing else, he seems like a very hard worker. But
I would
the
imagine
physical
I think that's a
limitation.
great way to put it. I think that's a great way to
Yeah.
put it. I'm guessing that again, that we're in the blinding part where it's not like I owe you. It's like I know you, right?
I
It's more about
believe in
that.
you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing too is like, we don't know how they're like, how does their view on drafting Obi change if Randall has this season last
Well,
year,
that's
right?
that's. I mean, that's why I
That's
was
the part
laughing
like it's
when
crazy to think about.
people were picking on the Thibodeau wasn't a huge whatever the phrase was of Randall before the season. It's like, yeah, no
Yeah.
shit. Was anybody? He was horrible. I mean, like this is news. I mean, the Knicks drafted Obi Toppin, right? That's literally
Yeah.
they drafted and a prospect who plays Randall's position, and not only is he a prospect, he was known as he was billed as the most NBA ready one. This wasn't like, oh, a 4-year guy, like, well, it's a project. This is the guy that supposedly you put in, you plug and play right away, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
I found that like it's funny the way it's like people know these things. Don't be so surprised about it when you hear things. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean Julius, it's like, I mean Thibodeau's been around the league for basically all of Julius's career. Like he's gonna have thoughts on him. He's not just
Of
gonna be like, I
course.
have no clue who this guy is.
By the way, it'd be more bothersome if I'd be more concerned if he came in and said, "No, this guy's great." That would have concerned me more because that would have like that would have like after what are you watching, right? I don't know. Like that would have bothered me more as opposed to
Yeah.
maybe I'm not so sold on him, but
Yeah, and I think you mentioned this, maybe, I don't know if it was on Twitter or on one of the pods you were on, how like, yeah, like those are his thoughts before he took the job, like when he came in,
Yeah, exactly.
and then he worked with Randall, he works with RJ, works with Mitch. It's like I mean, we don't know. Obviously, at least all I know is like what he says publicly, and publicly he's always like, "I love these guys, they're great, they work hard, blah blah blah." But like, I mean, you watch RJ Barrett this year, it's not hard to be like understand why Thibodeau would be like, "No, no, actually, let's keep him now."
For sure.
Yeah,
For sure. I mean, I always joke the guy who lost out on all of this most is probably David Fizdale. You know, there's a little Mark Jackson type stuff there where you swap nothing except the coach, and all of a sudden the team looks, twice as good. Doesn't look good for your future prospects. But
Yeah, yeah. Mark Berman noted that the other day. I think it was on my show. I don't even remember. I've listened to so much stuff the last few days that I don't remember if he even said it on my own show.
And Mark Berman and I just doing all the same shows in just different orders. That's what it kind of feels like right now.
It kind of, so. Although we haven't had you on Locked On Knicks yet, so I guess that's your next stop. I'll book it before we get done.
How many Knicks fan podcasts are there?
Too many, man. Too many, and every single one. We say all the time because of course, we talk inside base. Oh man, this is going way inside baseball on this podcast now. But we talk inside baseball about this stuff all the time, and we even amongst ourselves go, I can't believe that there's like 7 separate fan-run Knicks podcasts that all have big followings and are independently successful on their own.
Give me power rankings right now. Power rank them.
It's very wild. I don't know. I think I defend Schwinn because I put Locked On Knicks #1 because you know. But I don't know. Anyway,
on a different podcast. That's horrific.
Yeah, I'm pumping up my other work on the one that I'm guest hosting. Anyway, so the other day Tibbs, or I very recently there was an interview with Tibbs that came out, and he commented.
Yeah, I didn't get to read this one. I didn't get to read this one yet. This was the on ESPN, right?
Yeah, with Nick Friedel. It was really good.
Yeah.
But that's okay. We'll just pass along the one important part here too. He commented that staffs are getting bigger than ever now. In the NBA, that
coaching staffs
back when
coaching staffs, analytics departments, everything.
Yeah. So what sort of the Knicks I think have made strides in that area. Like all we saw for months after Rose was hired was every other week it would be someone was LinkedIn sleuthing and realized the Knicks hired so and so. Yeah, it was a pretty big deal over this offseason. People were going crazy for that. It helps when there's nothing else to talk about with the Knicks. But do you think
it was a long offseason? It was a long offseason,
and we're all stuck inside.
For the Knicks, especially, it was very long. But they've certainly, I guess they haven't really said anything about it, but they've paid lip service to the idea of having a bigger staff, having more analytics, having more voices and more people looking at different things. They've even gone so far as now they've installed that what's the Schwinn, you know this, I think what was that basket thing that they got installed the other day?
Bondi wrote the story on this, right? I saw it. I don't know. I know you're talking about.
I mean, I don't remember the name of it, but
I forget what it was called, but they had the
NOAA tracking system or something.
Yeah, the tracking system installed. It seems like they're moving more towards analytics and stuff. Do you think that that's again based off your reporting, and maybe you got some sense of this, maybe you didn't, but do you think that that's something that they're really putting a lot of effort into, is getting better and getting more modern in this staff than they were previously, where it seemed like they were kind of dinosaurs?
So, okay, here's the yes and no, right? That's my favorite answer. Brock Aller is into that stuff for sure, and he has a significant voice. So, and I think so. I don't know who the last person in the Knicks front office to have who the last person would be if anyone has ever had such a significant voice and also be such a staunch believer in that type of thinking, let's say, right? But I don't know how. My understanding, I'm trying to think how I can phrase this. Like, I don't know how much they're blending the analytics with the basketball thinking, right? This is a classic example we always talk about, right? It's you want people who understand both and them all at the table. When you sequester them, that's a difference, right? You don't just want somebody who you say, hey, can you run the numbers for me? I need to know the best. We want a 3-point shooter. Give me my sheet about best 3-point shooters, blah, and that's the exam who we should get. And obviously you can be more complicated than that, though sometimes in NBA front offices, the people asking for numbers think that that's like complicated, which is a problem. You want people who know at the table, who know how to ask the right questions, right? trying to think of an example. 3-point shooting example. This is really dumb. To you will be obvious. To you guys will be obvious. This is dumbed down. But the idea that you want someone who understands basketball, and they're all at the table, and you're discussing this, and the person to say, no, you don't want to go by 3-point percentage. You also want to go by volume, right? You got to include that. And that's a really oversimplistic example. But you want somebody who can ask the right questions and direct the requests and the questions in the proper place, and vice versa, right? And the basketball stuff to inform the analytics, the number crunching you're doing. I'm not sure how much of that the Knicks have, right? Where you have mixing. I'm not sure how much of that is going on. I think they have people in the building who know how to crunch numbers. I don't know if they have a say in terms of determining what numbers to crunch. Does that distinction make sense? That would be the question. And the main people at the table are certainly not doing that. I'm not saying they're not against. Excuse me. I'm not saying they're against analytics. I mean, Leon Rose is old school basketball thinker. He played basketball. He's an agent. He played Division III. I think it was Division III. He was a really good basketball player growing up. Where Wide Wes is obviously old school thinking. Thibodeau it's kind of a mixture there. But yeah, I don't know if that mix is happening.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to look at to see what sort of decisions I would say that like their first report card, I would say they came out pretty good as far as getting guys that were especially of value for the skills that they offer. Like I think that
for sure, like Nerlens Noel's a great example, right? And
Burks. Or Burks. Yeah, like Nerlens for 1 year, $5 million, Burks for 1 year, $6 million. I mean, based off the other contracts that were handed out this year versus the production that they're offering, I would say it seems to me like they have good people looking at the stats and trying to glean these things. But to your point in the article too, a lot of the decision making behind signing some of those guys and like signing Austin Rivers was like, oh, well, these guys will be easy flips. They looked at them like like someone, like a house flipper looks at a house to, just spruce up a little bit and then flip right away.
It's kind of like what they did with Marcus Morris last year, right?
Yeah.
Where, like they played him a bunch. He put up a bunch of numbers, and then they're like, "Okay, bye." And I mean, it'll be interesting to see what they do at deadline. Like as far as how they use analytics, it's confusing because they have you have somebody like Quickley who is like definitely an analytics darling. How they got there,
especially, right?
Yeah, and like how they got there. Obviously, it wasn't just like Wide Wes is pulling up his synergy and was like, yeah, look at these like timekeepers. Like that's obviously not what was happening. But they have him. They obviously understand like what value he has now. But then you do stuff like, okay, but we're gonna play Alfred Payton 30 minutes a night, and you're like, well, is that like how is that analytically sound? What's going on here? But then like even like I think the Derrick Rose thing, I actually think that piece is like really really interesting, and you touched on it in the article, and it's interesting they eventually did trade for him. But like I think that's actually a really good intersection between what you're talking about between blending like all these aspects, because Derrick Rose on the surface you're like, well, he's a penetrating guard, like we kind of need a floor spacer, we need this. But then you like watch the team play and you're like, okay, but like okay, his price point in the summer was much higher, right? Derrick Rose had a really good year last year. You probably would have to give up a first or something like that to get him in the offseason. You wait, like the price comes down, then you end up getting him for basically a dead salary, a mid-second, and then not only that, like, but you kind of see when he comes in, like, okay, maybe Tibbs's like dinosaur like dependency on Rose, like it actually makes sense because you're seeing like, oh wow, when he comes on the court, he commands this attention. Right? Yeah, like so you see it, and I think that's a really interesting domino effect of what you're talking about. Where like, okay, maybe Brock Aller is sitting there in November, like, no, we can't trade for Rose. Like this is an insane value. But then like 2 months later, he's like, oh yeah, no, we can do this now.
No, and that's where I'm saying you want people at the table who understand these things, right? So not specifically Rose, and again, I'll go back to 3-point shooting. Okay, we need shooting. Wait, maybe the answer though is we're just not getting open shots, and the way we can do that is if we get a penetrating guard, and that can trigger rotations to get open shots, right? And again, these are oversimplistic, but maybe not. And then let's talk about that. Okay, so maybe our answer is look up the people who are best drivers at penetrating and who create threes, right? And that's where I'm saying you need people at the table who understand these things and can work together, and that's the big thing. And I don't know if they have that though. Rose again. Process results. Maybe it is just Thibodeau understands that and just couldn't articulate. I don't know, couldn't articulate it. But the Rose thing is working on the other part. The members they give nothing. That's the
I
key
think
part.
he just sends Valentine's cards of like
Yeah,
Derrick Rose.
the whole Lil Dan, Taj, Derrick Rose,
Yeah.
I
Joakim
need these
Noah,
guys.
He's trying to
Casey Johnson.
currently trying to lure Luol Deng out of retirement.
Yeah, exactly.
Sending him voicemails every other day. Come on, buddy, just get back in
Yeah,
shape. You'll be
exactly.
good.
Exactly.
To sort of shift gears a little bit. So this again, I can't commend you enough. I really enjoyed the way that you told this story, in the fact that it was all
Thank you.
these. Yeah, no problem. Game recognized game, I guess. Although I've never written anything nearly this good, but whatever. But the way that you constructed the story is just sort of a bunch of anecdotes that then sort of in the end tied together and made this nice little bow and gave everybody a pretty informed picture. But I'm curious, were there any anecdotes that got left on the cutting room floor that you can share? Like, were there any other interesting little tidbits that didn't quite make it into the story? Because as you said, you didn't write a 6,000 word story.
Let me go. I'm going to open my little file here. So I try to be pretty good with like, if I have it confirmed, and I think it's good, I try to put it in. Like, I try to get it in there.
You can totally preface it by saying all this is unsubstantiated if you want. Nobody's
Yeah,
gonna think it's fun.
I'm gonna skip that part. I'm trying to open my file here. I'm trying to think. West. There was no. I put the Celtic stuff was in there, right? I found that interesting about West being interested, thinking the Celtics were on him. We're on too quickly.
Danny Ainge is going to leak their interest any minute now.
Danny Ainge thought about trading for Quickley, but
exactly. I think it's a good question. I think I emptied like things I could empty. I think I did. I think I did.
All right, that's fair enough. So to move,
and I promise that's not me being. I'm not trying to be annoying. If I like that question, I'm trying to remember. Like I don't. I'm going through afterwards. You can keep going. I'm looking through my notes here as I can kind of see.
I mean, it certainly seems like you emptied the clip. But if anything comes up that you think of, definitely feel free to just interrupt and drop it, and we'll keep our ears open for the rest of the show. I think so. This is an interesting thing to think about. Obviously you have the connection to the Hinkie Sixers and, writing Tanking to the Top, which again, very good book if anybody wants to pick that up and read it. They're one team, and the Celtics, who we just talked about, are another team that have been in sort of similar positions recently to where the Knicks are now. You could maybe argue the Nets as well, except for minus the surplus of draft picks, right? But the Sixers had a relatively clean cap sheet and a surplus of draft picks and, sort of, again, to the point of the title of your book, tanked their way to the top. The Knicks have sort of already completed their tanking phase, it seems like. And I guess if RJ Barrett is the big prize out of that, then cool. And hopefully he keeps developing the way that he does. But then you also have the Celtics, who a little different. They sort of never went away, but they were able to add players through the draft that have now become big cornerstones for them. But they've also resisted pulling the trigger probably too much, and that's being pretty widely reported now. Almost any time that any star of any renown gets traded, it's, oh, Danny Ainge was in on it, but he didn't make the move. And then you look at who they took with those draft picks, and it's like, okay, you could have reasonably made an offer for like Anthony Davis using the pick that you eventually took Aaron Nesmith with, like, and because it was more valuable before it happened than once the Grizzlies got good and became not a lottery pick anymore, or a very late lottery pick. But at any rate, do you think that there's sort of something to be learned from those two teams for the Knicks in the position that they're in now, with a lot of flexible cap space, with extra draft capital going forward thanks to the Porzingis trade, and with seemingly a burgeoning young core here that is sort of turning the corner? And what sort of pitfalls do you think that they should avoid going forward, with that?
I'd tamper on burgeoning young core. I mean, I guess I'm more of an RJ cynic. He's looked better this year. I'm not. I guess again, it's sometimes an oversimplification, but it's going to come down to the shooting with him. Yeah, I mean, I'm of the belief, like, I think it's okay to spend money. I kind of find myself doing that, but on the right guys, like young guys. Again, I mentioned Van Vliet before. This is my personal opinion. This isn't stuff, but Van Vliet, or I don't know, his name is going to start like Lonzo Ball this offseason. I think was someone who could actually make sense for the Knicks, even if you have to overpay. John Collins, guys like that, where they're young and there's room for growth, and it's not an albatross. Even if things don't go well, contracts are 4 years now, so that's what within a year and a half. They're like 2 years in, they're 2 years away. You can trade any contract that's 2 years away, especially for a 26-year-old, whatever it be. So I'm of the belief that I think if the Knicks, you told me the Knicks end up with Lonzo Ball next year on like a 4-year, $90 million, which sounds whatever it be, be an overpay, but I think that makes them better. I like that. I think you could use some of that stuff. The part I don't know is like going back to Leon Rose's plan. I don't know they know, like, they're all sort of back channel conversations. I imagine they have a list of stars. This is not the process, right? This will not be that. Like this team, that is not what Leon Rose is going to do. I imagine there's a list of stars that they think they can get or want to get, or whoever it be, via connections, whatever reason, whatever way, method. And I'm imagining the goal here is to sort of how the Lakers do with Anthony Davis, right? Where you have enough to give up in a trade. The guy says, I will only re-sign with that team. He makes it clear, so other teams won't give anything up, and the trade gets forced. Who that could be, I have no idea, right? I have no idea. Donovan Mitchell, Devin Booker, I don't know. I don't see that happening. Those are the obvious ones. A couple of years ago, people would say. I mean, Suns are number 2 in the West with Chris Paul, and Utah's number 1, right? So maybe like their next contract in 4 years. Karl Anthony Towns is the obvious name, but maybe it's guys we don't know. But I'm imagining there's somebody. I have to imagine they have some guy or 2 or 3 in mind there.
Yeah, if you were going to make your best educated, I asked to go back to Berman again. I asked Berman the same question the other day. If you were going to make an educated guess as to who you think the guy would be, you think it's probably Cat? That seems to be the answer that everybody thinks.
I mean, that's the answer just based on like that team blows, and it looks like things could blow up there. Yeah, it looks like Minnesota's always a mess. Ownership's always a mess there. They already fired the coach. I mean, the D'Angelo Russell thing, I don't know who he's going to leave. Okay, sorry. I know I asked you to come here, but I'm leaving, so that'd be awkward for him, but okay. Yeah, that's the
it's
one.
It's a business. You just fall back on that one, right? It's a business.
It's a business, yeah. Otherwise,
I had to do this for my family.
Yeah, I don't know who. I really don't know who. Like, people I remember, I think Macri wrote about Joel Embiid last year. I don't see that one. I don't see him leading the Sixers. I don't know. Yeah, I can go through the list. I can queue it up. I don't know who. So that Towns my bet. I mean, the other way obviously is like every 6 months or somebody comes on board. We don't see it happening. But it's usually semi-predictable. Like James Harden was semi-predictable. A couple of years ago, you can kind of read the tea leaves. Towns seems to be the guy right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really tricky because, and like this is something I wrote about at the time, but like once the Knicks did the Porzingis trade, like if they didn't get stars in 2019, it was basically really hard to see. Like there were so many stars in that market, and typically like when stars move, they're at least going to stay where they are for 2 years, right? Unless you're Jimmy Butler and you're just like, I don't give a shit about anything. Most of these guys will at least stay there for 2 years. So it was like, okay, they signed in 2019, and most of these guys signed for what, 4-year, 5-year deals. A bunch of guys got traded in that year or the year before. Like it's just we're in this period right now where I think there's a lot of like stars who are not able to move, or like even with Cat, if Cat goes to ownership and is like, I want to get out of here, they're gonna look at it and be like, well, you have 3 years left on your contract.
Yeah, they're not exactly. They're not required to do anything.
Like we don't need to do anything with you right now. Just hang out. So like I think the Knicks are in this position where not even because they're being smart or because like they're taking the long view, but like they have to kind of take the long view, I think, until earliest 2022 offseason. Like that's when a guy like Cat or Booker, they have 2 years left on their contract. So maybe like then you get into the range where, hey, look, like you can trade me now and get more for me, or you can trade me next year and I'm an expiring contract because I'm not re-signing here no matter what. But until then, like, I mean, you got Beal, but Beal seems like he really wants to do the Damian Lillard, like, I'm staying here for life thing. Maybe that changes if Washington has a really depressing end of the season and they just miss the playoffs entirely. But yeah, like it just seems like whether they want to or not, they have to do the hard work right now of like, okay, we have to develop our own talent. We have to develop our own core. And like, yeah, I'm with you. Like, I don't know if like Van Vliet, I would have loved if they signed Van Vliet. I was like his biggest booster. Sure. Like I wanted that because I think like, I mean, imagine this team right now with Fred Van Vliet. It's so much better. And like, I don't know if I believe in Lonzo to the same degree, but like I can see that argument. And so at some point, like, yeah, you have this cap space and it's great, but you have to use it to move your team forward. And like the 1-year contracts are cool, but like you need to start getting pieces in that have like a benefit to your team for the next year, 2 years, 3 years. And like Randall's having a good year, okay? Like he is having a really, really good year. So that, he's got an all-star bid, that gives you some clout around the NBA. Can you use that? Like you're the Knicks. Like, can the Knicks with an all-star, can they go into the free agent market and convince guys like, hey, look, like this is where you should be, and yeah, we'll pay you, but like you need to come here, and can they pull that? That'll be interesting to really see.
And the Van Vliet thing, and this is where I call Lonzo Ball, I think a key thing with these guys is you get guys who, if the star comes available, they could play with them. That's a key part. So it goes to being able to play off the ball a little bit, shoot. That's why I was big on Van Vliet, because I just never.
Or they can be part of the package to trade for them.
Correct, but this Van Vliet, like he is never going to be a pro. Having him on your team, even if he's overpaid, he will never be present schematic issues. He blends with everyone, can play with everyone. You can get the most ball. He could play with James Harden. He could play with I don't know whoever. It doesn't make a difference, and he could fit really well. Lonzo Ball he's not the same, but he's a off guard and a half court who plays defense and shoots a little bit. I'm not. And this is going to sound like I'm pumping up Lonzo Ball. I don't think Lonzo Ball is the greatest player, but I agree. You want to just use guys who, if you sign guys who they can fit with other players, other stars, they come in and they're young, so there's room for growth. I'm just pro that. Like, and I don't know the other. Again, I'm looking through, like you said, Beal. If Beal does come available, he's the kind of guy, again, fits with so many teams. There's going to be a bidding war for him, and that'd be hard unless he specifically wants to go to the Knicks. Every contender is going to be in on him. And New Orleans can throw all their picks because he fits really well with those guys. And I find it hard to believe that he ends up a Knick. I'm looking, like, if you look through the points per game leaders, I guess Zach LaVine is one of the options. Other than that, you're going to bet on what, Trae Young getting upset in a few years? I don't know. You're going down. Like, these guys, they're not, like you said, they're not becoming available. Brandon Ingram, if things go poorly there. De'Aaron Fox, I guess. I'm making things, these guys are just signed if they demand trades. But yeah, I don't see where the A-listers coming from in the next year or two, which that's not meant to like depress things. It just means like, okay, so let's pivot and see how you're going to progress here.
That's just the reality of the situation, but it's fine. You can just say that you're a big baller brand all
the way. He's still got his pair of ZO2s on the shoe shelf back there.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm just mostly interested to see, like, as you guys just said, there's not going to be a lot of star power presumably available anytime soon. But then you do have like Brian Windhorst speculating and saying openly, like, I think there's a star that's going to demand a trade to the Knicks in the next 12 months. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the power dynamic plays out in that. Because if it is Cat, it's going to be just potentially the latest chapter in a long line of these guys players are getting a really, really high amount of control in the NBA at this point, to the point where, guys with multiple years left on their contracts seem to more or less be able to demand a trade and just be able to make it happen. It's kind of interesting. But I think if that's going to happen for the Knicks in the next year, it's really going to push what the limits of that is, like how far out can these guys start demanding trades? And then also it'll be interesting to see if the Knicks then get put in a situation where they're really getting extorted for extra picks and extra players and stuff like that to make this sort of thing happen, and whether it would even be worth it for them at that point. I think ultimately that's going to sort of prove, and maybe this is a good note to start sort of wrapping up on, but I think that's going to be one of those sort of what's the word I'm looking for, like proving himself moments for Leon Rose.
Is it like the right star? Like, I mean, we've been talking about Cat. Like, I don't know. I don't think Cat is the guy that you just like
sell the farm for.
Like I mean, we did this we saw it with Melo, right? And like there were a lot of things that was fraught with, because it wasn't just the Melo trade. It was the fact that like you also maxed Amari 6 months before that, and he was already breaking down. Then you do like the Billups thing, and you have to amnesty him. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. But it's like, if you don't go for the right star, there's problems, and like you really got to ask yourself, like, if we have to gut this team and like basically what we're left with is RJ, Randall, and Cat, like what is that team doing in a conference that has KD, Kyrie, Harden, that has Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, and crew? Like those are the questions that I think, like it's all well and good trading for a star. I actually don't even think that's necessarily the hard part about it. The hard part is like, okay, are you getting the right star? And then do you have the chops and the wherewithal to build around them? Like, say what you will, Sean Marks, he gut the team for the guys that he has, but he's made these really shrewd moves. Like, you look at somebody like Bruce Brown, he got him for nothing, and he's
Yeah,
been
it's
awesome for
amazing.
them.
It's amazing that they did these trades and are still deep, right? It's like that usually is a paradox. It does not usually occur, and yet they're still 8 deep or whatever it is. And some of it, yeah, he read the team leads properly and made a few smart moves here or there, whether Andrew Shaman or Bruce Brown and guys like that, and Jeff Green, and boom, all of a sudden you have an 8-man rotation, and that's all you need. So I agree with you on that one.
Yeah, so like I think that's really like, can Leon Rose thread that needle? We'll find out, I guess.
Yeah, and so I guess we could send you off on that, Yaron, as far as what's like if you were going to look into your crystal ball and see, hey, this is how the Leon Rose regime is going to work out. Do you think based on, and it's unfair to ask because it's like you reported one story based off one off season, but if you're going to look into the crystal ball, what do you think is going to ultimately be the legacy of this front office by the time that all said and done?
That's a good question. I would bet on the Carmelo Anthony Knicks type thing, right? Maybe I don't mean maybe that fast, but just maybe not a finals contender, but a really good team. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they'll make all the exact proper moves to, like you just mentioned, to around the edges to properly build it. But again, maybe you just get the right guys. Like I think this team will get good. I think that's going to happen. I think they have some options, and we're seeing Thibodeau what he can do, and we're seeing Randall thing and all that. I don't know how prudent they're going to be in their movement forward. Then again, maybe that's fine because you just want relevancy, right? And it would not surprise me if the Knicks are a team playing the conference finals in 3 years, right? I can see that. I'm making that up. It sounds crazy, but 3 years is a long time. That wouldn't shock me. I would be surprised if they're winning a finals in 3 years, 4 years.
Well, I think for a fan base that still deifies the Knicks of the 90s after so many years, for more or less, made one finals and made some conference finals and second rounds and all that stuff, I think that would be more than enough for a lot of people at this point.
Exactly.
But Yaron, this has been great. Thank you so much for taking so much time with us. We really pushed on we said we were maybe going to take about an hour, and we started to push on that. So thanks for being generous with your time. You should come back sometime for one of the 2-hour marathons where Schwinn rants for 30 minutes at a time.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
But in the meantime, do you want to tell everybody where to find you online? Any stuff that you want to promote other than the awesome story and the book and everything?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter is probably the best place. Yaron Weitzman. Check out the book. Paperback coming out this week, next week, whatever that is. Articles on 538 and other places, and Ringer and the New York Post last time. And podcast, Weitzman Can't Jump. Howard Beck. I know Knicks fans love Howard Beck, so he was on with me. So.
Good friend of mine.
I appreciate you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Yaron. Appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you taking so much time to answer these questions, especially after already, as we said, doing the grand Knicks press tour this week.
I appreciate it. Listen, you guys want to talk about me? I'll talk about me all day. No, it's great.
Beautiful. All right, thanks so much, man.